We just worked on this truck doing some front brake work. My friend here just bought this thing at an auction. It sat for a couple of years, and the brakes are shaking and shimmying when he steps on the brake. So pedal went to the floor. We bled it out this morning. He had changed a couple of steel brake lines, and so now we're bringing it back. We're going to put we jacked it up a little while ago and tried to turn the wheels by hand. They wouldn't turn. You had to really bear hug the wheel and really wrench it to try to turn it on both sides. So we're going to change both calipers, both rotors, put some front brake pads on it, and we're going to tape that job and show you how we do that. First thing I'm going to do, this is all jacked up right now, and I'm going to show that I can't turn this wheel freely. Real tight. So I know the calipers are locked up. Possibly the brake line, the rubber brake hoses, but I just bled them and they bled easily. So if they bleed easily, I just don't believe it's the brake line. I know the rotors are all rusted up, calipers are rusted up. It's been sitting a long time. So we're going to change the rotors and calipers, and 7/8 socket. These little plastic things hold the hubcaps on. Just turn them out by hand. It's the same truck that I did the tie rod ends on the other video, and he bought it at an auction, and it sat for a couple of years before he bought it. So it's got a number of little things that needs to be fixed on it, number of bugs to work out. Got the wheel turned to the right so that I can have access to the back side of this where the caliper is. And the tools I'm most likely going to be using, usually I just use a screwdriver, big screwdriver to compress the piston back into the caliper. But since these are froze up, I may not get away with that. I'm going to try. But I got a C-clamp here, big heavy-duty C-clamp. Got a hammer and it's a tool I use a lot. It's just a tire tool with the angled end cut off of it, and I use it a lot for different things. And a big screwdriver. Of course, I can't hammer very much on the end of a screwdriver because it's all plastic in there. This I can hammer on, but it's not as tough a metal as the screwdriver. So win some, lose some. We got a 3/8 hex socket or Allen socket, 3/8. And that goes in the caliper holes right here, this one and another one up there. And that's how you take your caliper off. But first, before we take the caliper off, we have to compress this piston here back inside the caliper. That's got to be pushed back in there, and that's what our problem is. It is stuck. And we're going to force it in there, if nothing else, just enough to get the caliper off of the rotor. Actually, the caliper is compressing, so maybe that's not as much of our problem. I don't know if you can see, there's a gap starting to show up between the padding on the brake pad and the rotor. So maybe the biggest part of our problem is the caliper is rusted into place in this mounting area where it's supposed to be able to slide in and out to self-adjust. That does seem to be the issue because it's not sliding out. There, we got it to slide out a little bit now. It's still awful tight. That's what it was. We got it freed up now. So the biggest part of the problem with this caliper was the rust in here. So the outer part of the caliper was pulled over this way and it wasn't relaxing and coming back. But we're still going to change the calipers while we're doing this job. Get it all done right once and for all. Won't have to mess with it again. First, before I take the caliper off, I'm going to break the bolt loose that holds the brake hose on. Just break it loose where I can take it off. I'm not going to take the hose off until after the caliper is off and I have the new one ready to go on. The reason why is because I don't want all the fluid running out. It's going to continue to drip and drain out of there as long as it's open. And I don't want it to do that. So here's the new caliper. You got one for both sides and they are different. And the difference is they mount, this one mounts like this on there with the piston side towards the inside. The bleeder valve has to be on the top. That has to be on the top, of course, and that's the difference. This one, if we tried to mount it that way, the bleeder valve would be on the bottom. So this goes to the other side. I'm going to put it over there. I'm not getting any evidence that this rotor is out of round. It really doesn't look to be in that bad a shape. So I'm waiting for the owner to call me back, discuss it with him. I might leave the rotor on there, so for now I'm just going to change the caliper and the pads, and we'll get with him on the rotor. You got to be careful where you hit it with a hammer and how hard, because there's a pretty expensive core charge on these. They want to rebuild them and resell them, so got to be careful about that. This brake line is already loosened up, and I have two copper washers I'm going to replace. They come with the new one on each side of this banjo fitting. That's called the banjo fitting when you got a hole going through it. Banjo fitting, the bolt has a hole in it right there, and a hole in it on this end. And so the fluid goes through here and into here and into the cylinder. You got to do this kind of quick so I don't lose too much fluid. I'm just going to set this up here for a second while I'm putting this back on here. And that's on there. I'm going to clean all this loose rust off of here where the caliper mounts, especially up in here where it slides. Up here and down here where the caliper has to slide to self-adjust. That was what our original problem was. So I'm going to get a sharp scraper and a wire brush. Put some grease on there. Don't want it on the rotor, but I do want it on this slide. Same thing on the bottom. Put the brake shoes on. One with that spring goes on the outside, fits those detents. And this one has this kind of a spring that goes inside the caliper, inside the piston of the caliper. Got to push these bolts and spacers back so they don't get in the way. There we go. Now I just got to bolt it down. We got to top off the brake fluid before we bleed it out down there. And you see the brake fluid line is right here. That's where it is right now. When we bled the brakes a while ago, I purposely told the owner, let's not fill this thing up all the way because you are kind of due for some brake pads before too long. And if you fill this up all the way with brake fluid and then you go and change the brake pads, when you push the pistons in on the calipers, it's going to push fluid up in here out of the caliper. And if you fill this up before you do that, it's going to squirt out of there, and that stuff will strip paint really quick. So you don't want that happening. You want to make sure this is not completely full before you push your calipers in. I don't need to put the other top on, just that for now, because I'm going to bleed it out down below. Drip bleeding is all I need to do when I'm changing a caliper if I am reasonably sure that there's no air caught in the line anywhere going up the system. We just bled this thing out an hour or so ago, so I know there's no air caught in the lines. This is much lower, probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet lower than the master cylinder. So it's just going to siphon fluid right out of the master cylinder. It's not going to pull any air in it. And so all you got to do is let it drip bleed. Open this up. Somebody's going to disagree, and that's fine. Been doing this many years, and it works. It works fine. If someone wants to disagree, they can put a comment and explain why, and that's good. That's okay. I don't appreciate it when people leave a thumbs down and don't say anything, don't say why. Some people will do that. So this should just start coming out here pretty soon. Here it comes. Just watch it for a few seconds. If I don't see any bubbles. No bubbles. You can tap on it a little bit. See, in case there's a bubble stuck inside. Shake it loose. Very good. Now I'm going to go inside and step on the brake pedal to close the caliper down so that we don't have a no brake situation when we try to drive it away. Okay. Very good. All right, we'll put the wheel back on. I'm going to go do the other side, and as always, I'm not going to record the other side unless I find something different over there that I need to add to the video. If this is the end of it, well then I thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. I thought I was finished with this video, but I'm not. I got to change the rotor on this side, so we will get that one on video. I got this caliper freed up just enough to be able to tell that when I rotate the rotor, it's got a tight side right there. And it's hard to get past it. And then it frees up over here. So we got a warped rotor, and I'm going to record doing that because it's different than on a regular car, where this is a four-wheel drive. On a regular car, take the rotor, you take the caliper off, and the rotor comes right off. The lug nuts hold it on with the wheel, with the tire, hold it on tight against the hub. The caliper has to come off so that you can pull the rotor off. Nothing to it. You don't need to be taught how to do that on a regular car, but four-wheel drive, you got to take the hub off. So we will do that on the video. Got the caliper switched out. Got an 1 and 3/8 socket going in the middle here. We got to take that nut off of the drive shaft. It's a front wheel drive. It's a four-wheel drive truck. I'm going to spray some WD on these inner hub nuts to get those off easier without stripping the threads, hopefully. That's a self-locking nut in there, so I'll go ahead and take this off. It's not going on as good as I'd like it to. Hopefully that'll just come off with this 1/2 inch impact. If not, we'll go in the shop and get a bigger one. Got a 21mm socket on a breaker bar to break them loose. These nuts back in here all the way around, and I got a cheater pipe, as you can see, in between the studs out here. We got to do that all the way around. I wish I had done this before I took the caliper off. I didn't know they were going to be that tight, just didn't think about it. I got to do it with a wrench. The ratchet just won't fit. It'll fit in there for a few threads, and then it gets caught behind this side, and it won't. You have to tighten it back up again to get the ratchet off. So I got to use a wrench. It's going to take a while. Now we got to go around the back. I'm going to try to see what I'm doing here. I'm having trouble. I think that's it there. We got to take these 4 bolts. This one, and the 2 on the other side. I take those off, pull the whole hub off out in the front. They were pretty tight. I had to break them loose with a 1/2 inch breaker bar. Now I'm using a 3/8 with a swivel socket. It's 15mm. They're coming off like that. Now I got to turn the steering wheel the other way. Now I got to undo this anti-lock brake line right here. Just got to fold these tabs back just a little bit with a screwdriver. Then I got to go up here and unplug it up here. Take that with me so I don't break it when I pull this off of there. Now I got to knock it off with a hammer, and just tapping in the center here, knock this hub out. Don't hit that too hard, mess up the threads. knock that axle shaft out of there, and then this should start coming off. If not, you can hit it behind the rotor also. You gotta have that wire loose. And just carefully take stuff off and set it down in a position you can remember how they go back on. You gotta get this hub off of there, and I'm going to have to knock these studs out from the other side. It's an awful lot of rust in there. So it's a good practice to change the bearing while you're doing it, but since this is a different kind of project, we're not going to do that on this one. So I'm going to go get a rag to put on this. I don't want rusty flakes and stuff getting in that grease. If I booger up the corners on that, I'll just touch them up on the grinder. I'm talking about as far as putting a socket on there. That's a lug nut. I took all the studs out, threw them over there. Now hold this up and tap this lightly, like so, until that comes off. There's my rotor. I'm going to use my old rotor for a place to put these bolts back in. These studs. Rusty. Spray a little oil on them, helps them go in a little easier. I have to knock the crust off of all of them, but I got them all in, and then I'm looking right down inside. Let's see if we can get closer. I'm looking down inside and seeing a little bit of the shoulder past the threads of the bolt, and I see more of it on this one and 2 or 3 others than I do on this one and this one. So I'm going to go back in and hit them again on these that I know didn't quite go in as far. The one here by my finger is one of them. I'm going to hit that one first. Yeah, it came out more. And then this one here might be short just a bit. That's just to hold that spline still so I can turn this and get it to spline. We'll put this plate back on there with this side going out, and this slot here is for the wire hanging on these bolts. These bolts are the bolts that hold all of this on. I'm just sticking them back in there. I didn't show that when I put them in, but I'm putting them back in there to hold this on here. Got the vice grip on there to hold my shaft from turning. Well, I finally got the 4 bolts started in the back. A couple of times I didn't have that square part of the hub lined up exactly where it needed to be, and I had to tap this back in to free it up again so I could rotate it again. Had to hang this plate on those bolts, keep this thing hanging on the bolts so that it didn't drop down out of place, and then it was a little tricky, but I got it started now. Sorry, I can't tell you any shortcuts on how to do that. Just got to fight with it. I'm going to go catty-cornered, cross-cornered, tightening these down. I got this little impact, this 3/8 impact all the way down on the lowest speed. Go ahead and kick it up to the higher speed and get it all nice and tight. Smooth braking. That was it, that one bad rotor. Oh yeah, that's good.